Okay, so our guest today is Matt Jones, all the way from the Great Britain. Great Britain. Matt,
Hi.
thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Our audience is the agents for the San Francisco East Bay. And the reason we chose you to be as our guest today is you have a very unique approach to selling homes and to looking at homes that I would like you to share with all of us. Like being in real estate sales, the way we tend to approach it is units, volume, numbers, bottom line. And when I spoke to you first, I was very impressed with the way you looked at a house and how a house should be for the family that you are serving. So would you like to tell us more about that?
Of course. I mean, it's like a lot of things. So if you look at, say, even in personal terms, if you look at somebody walking down the street, what do you see? You see a person, you see a height, eye color, clothes, you see hair color, all sorts of physical things. But you still don't know that person, and you still don't know whether you can get on with that person or you can have a future with that person. Unless you stop and talk to them, take time to find out about that person, their history, what they've been through. So my approach is akin to that, insofar that when you have an inanimate object like a house, why would you choose that house over another house? And as you said on your introduction there, yeah, you can look in volume, you can look in location, size of plot, color of walls. You can look at all these factors, and yes, they're a very quick impression that you make of that building. But when I look at a building, or when I transform, which is a word I like to use, I used to refer to it as restoring properties. So I don't tend to build new properties. I work with more historic buildings. They don't have to be that old, but what I mean by historic is that they have a history. And that's what I'm looking at. You can find out a history about a house. You can find out a lot online these days. But actually what you need to do is you need to go to that house and you need to feel that house and walk around that house, meet the neighbours, look at the schools, learn about that area and whether that house can ever tick enough boxes to actually ever be qualified as a home. So when I'm restoring a property or transforming a property, as I like to say now, I'm mixing old with new. And it's quite a big thing in London at the moment, especially in the East End of London, that's become very trendy over the last few years. It's got a very Victorian base, it's got a very traditional base, but with that comes the history, the families that have lived there, the parties, the Christmases, the fires, the films, the newborns, the new weds. It's got that in its fabric as well. You can't see it, but you can feel it. And as you walk around, it's a bit like the Newtonian principle. You look at the house that can become a home, and to make it into a home, you need to build on top of what they originally set out to do. So then you can then start adding, say, typically in London at the moment, you're walking through a Victorian house that's restored in all its glory with a lot of natural products, stone, oak, slate, lead. You're working with real basic materials. It's a style that they call in Sweden Gustavian, and it's working with natural products, natural colors that we would call pastel shades. Typically, you can, in England, you're looking at color shades and color charts that are made by companies like Farrow and Ball, Little Green, that work with National Trust colors from historic properties. We work with William Morris a lot. There's a William Morris Centre in Walthamstow in East London, So it's all linked in a place called Lloyd Park. It's all linked in and linked together. So you're mixing old with new. But what you get from that is you're actually moving the house with its soul and its potential to become a home. A home has to have a practical level as well, has to function as a home. Increasingly, homes are used for offices. Increasingly, homes are used in this country to accommodate different generations. That's due to cultural influences, that's due to economic influences. So returning students that can't get a job, that return back to the home. Elderly parents that perhaps if they're going into a home, one wouldn't be happy, a care home, I mean by that. And also in this country at the moment, that you're looking at well over £1,000 a week per person in a home like that. And it's not everyone that wants to put their parents away, as we say. So is whether their house can accommodate different generations at different times of their lives, but in the context of being private as well. You have shared spaces, but it's very important to have private spaces as well. So we went through a phase where we did a very open plan. I think, forgive me, we almost went American. Big open plan downstairs, but it actually doesn't work now because you need office space unless you want to be pushed into the room that no one else wants, looking at a brick wall or looking over the dust cans or whatever. You need actually private space. You need houses that are able to function at a level that will accommodate different generations, different demands on that house from work, from play, from socializing. So increasingly, I'm introducing smart elements into the house. You don't see them, but they're there. Again, you're adding your own soul. So you might be voice activating your heating, and that can be as precise as you want. You can do individual rooms. You can tap into apps on your phone. You can adjust the mood lightings. We have a big push on green energy, conservation. We're very conscious of carbon footprints. We're developing passive houses, carbon neutral houses, using a lot of reclaimed materials. So things are changing again, but again, these new modern things make our lives a lot easier to live, especially when different demands are made at the same time. So going back to your original question about elaborating on how I look at a house, I'm looking at whether a house can become a home. You can show clients, and your competitors can show clients many, many houses. And they will view many houses online. I'd say go and look at them in person, but only one of those houses will ever feel like home. And that house that becomes a home, as you open the front door, it hugs you and it says, welcome, welcome home. And it feels safe. And that's what I'm looking for when I look at property, a house that has the potential to become a home.
Tell us more about the soul of the house.
The soul of the house is a bit like, again, the soul of a person. And people have said before, the way you talk about houses is the way that I talk about people. But as we said earlier on, in reality, the analogy is very similar because houses have a history. Houses have had good things happen to them, bad things happen to them. They've witnessed more things than they've actually initiated themselves for obvious reasons. But the soul of that house is in the inanimate part of the house. It's in the render, it's in the bricks, it's in the wood, it's in the glass. People that worked in that house had an effect on that house as well. You can walk into a house, and I don't know if you ever use the phrase over there, we have happy houses. You walk into a house and it makes you smile. Do you go into houses like that?
Yes.
We've all been into a house, we walk in there and we go, oh my God, and you can't wait to get out. Now, why is that? Is it because they haven't got a black wall? Well, in fact, you've got black houses over there now, haven't you?
Mhm.
So you don't necessarily walk into a black house and go, oh my God, because it's got a black wall. That can actually be, that can be good. But you're looking at something and you're trying to work out, so you almost deconstruct it. So if you see something beautiful, if you see a beautiful church with a stained glass window, or you see a beautiful car, if you deconstruct it, you can work out why it's beautiful. But when you look at the soul of a house, you can't deconstruct it physically. So you have to find out about that house. Classic example, my daughter, my youngest daughter, has just bought a house. It was built in 1937. She bought it 2 weeks ago. Now, we found out about the history of that house by talking to the neighbours. You can find out some stuff online. You can go to land registry records. You can talk to, but the best thing is go and talk to the neighbours. And I always say to neighbours, you know, we get chatting, tell me one good reason why I shouldn't buy this house. And it's a very honest question and it deserves an honest answer. So they will talk quite openly. They're not going to lie to you because you're potentially going to be a neighbour. But what comes back is, oh, well, we've been living here, as it turned out, Derek and Lynn over the back, heads appeared over the fence, introduced themselves and said, oh, you know, you're thinking of buying this house. And my daughter said, well, yes, we are. And he said, oh, well, I've lived here long enough as a child as well. We saw this house built.
Wow.
And he said the couple that built it lived here. They had one daughter who stayed there and lived there until she died. And she was a teacher at a local school. So we knew that house from 1937 had only ever been owned by one family. And then once you start to cross-reference, for example, the school that she taught at, my middle brother went to. Now, he never knew Brenda by her first name. We don't know school teachers from a certain generation by their first names, but it transpired that she had taught him and several of his friends. So we were buying his geography teacher's house, how it all links together. And then you find out that, so you've got one family there. Now, the interesting thing about that, for example, and I don't know if it works in the San Francisco area as well, is that what people tend to do, almost out of respect, they don't change the house. But what you're getting is you're getting an uncut diamond because you're getting a house with its history as it was made. So it's almost like stepping back in time. So the fireplaces, the doors, the bathrooms, the bath is the original bath from 1937. And I bet that's got some stories. But the soul is about really the family life and the parties and the laughter and all the nice things that happened in that house. Bad things happen as well, but for a good home, the good outweighs the bad. So when you walk into a home and it makes you smile, that's because it's got a good soul.
Would you buy a house if there was a murder in it or a suicide?
It's a very interesting question. I can answer it by explaining when I buy a house, I have a house assessed by somebody who can feel more than I can. And what was explained to me was that when you go into a house, if bad things have happened in that house, you can get rid of that vibe. If bad things have happened on the land that the house stands on, you can't, and you walk away. Listen, a lot of, I wouldn't buy a house from a mass murderer. Well, would I buy a house from a mass murderer? Potentially, yes. But would I buy a house where mass murders were committed? Definitely no. But again, without walking into that house, you can't get a feel for it.
To feel
So
it.
say it's an honest question, but it's an interesting question, but you can only tell by finding out a little bit more about it.
How is the market in Southend, where you are, by the sea?
The market is overall, as it is in the country as a whole, is going up.
You're an
And
island.
the reasons,
Mhm.
we're an island, yeah. The reason it's going up is because it's purely demand and supply. We don't build enough houses, and whatever people think about Brexit or understand about Brexit, we still have a lot more people who want houses than we're building. So the simple fact, economic fact, is that with more demand than supply, prices go up. But if you look across different areas of Britain and you look at what socioeconomic factors affect prices, so we had a situation where, say, a little village on the Devon-Cornwall borders has gone up 35% in the last 2 years. We had a thing called race for space. So when the pandemic hit and the lockdown started, people working remotely decided that they'd move to places with gardens and open space and beaches. So what happened in London, and we're just literally 40 miles from London, so we got some of the ripple effect. What happened was that people moved out of London, but what they were moving out of were flats. And typically in areas like the areas you've heard about, Mayfair, Knightsbridge, Chelsea, Kensington, because they didn't have any private space, outdoor space. So prices dipped in those sort of 3 or 4 areas by up to 20%. You move the ripple out where the people are going to, and those places went up exponentially. So Southend, we're by the sea, we're on the Thames estuary of the North Sea. Our prices have gone up because we have had quite a few people moving down from London for that race for space and the good schools and other factors that come into when you decide as to whether that can make a good family home. So yes, Southend has gone up along with a lot of other areas. London is going back up again, but not the new build apartments. There, as we just mentioned about, they want outside space, and I don't mean a balcony, I mean a garden. We also had an issue here, I'm not sure what's happening in America, we had an issue here with cladding. This cladding they put on the outside of buildings to make them look smooth. It's a quick fix. They're panels that go on the outside, they clip on literally. And we had a situation a few years back, I don't know if you ever heard of Grenfell Tower, that had this cladding on the building. The problem was it wasn't fire retardant material. So a lot of these buildings have actually become unsellable because the mortgage companies won't issue a mortgage against them because they don't comply with fire regulations. So that's an ongoing thing at the moment. So new build apartments aren't moving very fast. Houses with good transport links still into London because people, including members of my family, are being called back into the office now. Remote working works to a certain extent, but you get a diminishing scale of returns. And of course, with business, as in your business, it's about networking. You can talk on Zoom. Zoom isn't the most personal way to do business, but sometimes it's the only way you can do business. But what you actually need to do is you need to have your meetings, your huddles, or whatever you refer to them as, because we all need human contact. We all need to bounce ideas. We all need to read people's expressions. We need to get reactions. And on things like Zoom or just a phone call, you can't do that. We need to interact. We're part of a dynamic as you are, back to what we were talking about with the house. So as you develop the house, how you're incorporating new ideas and perhaps new sections. So typically, say, walking through that Victorian house in London, we're extending out the back of the house into a modern kitchen living area. A lot of light, a lot of glass, a lot of high-tech kitchens made by very good companies. People spend a fortune on kitchens here. But they also mix in a link. So you might link with a column radiator, you might link with a brick wall. There'll be a nod to the past, and there'll be what I refer to as a Narnia door, typically a crittler, steel, thin profiled glass door going through into the new area. So it's almost like a reveal. You get a hint through the glass as you walk up to it, and it's the lights drawing you into it. And then you walk into your kitchen, diner, kitchen lounge, however it's referred to now over here. But this is where people, in the old days, they were congregating in lounges. Nowadays, they tend to congregate in kitchen areas. So within that area, these are quite big areas. You have almost like zones, and that can be matched with lighting as well. So you can match moods, you can match what people need from the light. But in that one area, you may have people watching television, you may have people working, people cooking, people chatting. So you can do that within one area, as much as, say, now going into the gardens and stuff. So the garden then becomes another room onto the house. And visually it links very well. And what we do is we link with materials or colours, and you get a perspective as you look through. But the room is designed with that as part of the backdrop, so that you get the full effect, the full dynamic. So yes, so prices are going up. They're still going up. London's starting to go back up again, but apartments are lagging behind a bit. Because what happened in London is really, if you're looking like places like New York, I'm not sure about in California.
San Francisco too.
If you look around Central Park, I mean, the majority of those apartments that are built are never lived in. They're bought by hedge funds. They're purely there to make a return for the investors. These aren't homes. These are just housing stock that are traded. People we have over here, some of my friends trade funds for big companies in America. And what they do is they buy up, do you remember the junk bond fiasco? Yes. And all the repossessions, right? Well, I knew people over here, very prominent people worldwide, just buying anything a bank had on repossession. They did it over here back in 1989. They learned the trick here. They went to the banks, they said, any repossessions you've got, we'll buy over the phone. But our interest is to buy streets of houses. And then what they do is they then rent them back to the people that couldn't afford the mortgages in the first place, and they generate a yield. So then they're turning people's homes and houses into investment vehicles. So you then have a house that is generating a yield, and depending on what the investor wants return-wise, if he's looking for 5%, so you're working at 20 times the annual rental to give you a 5% yield, and they're parceling those up in lots of tens, and they're auctioning those off. It's almost like a bond trade. So you've got a fixed term revenue against an asset that you're betting as well, hopefully appreciates as well. So that's been going on here. I know for a fact it's been going on in America as well. And the people that did get involved, including one of the biggest investors through Blackstone, was Warren Buffett. He funded a lot of it. So again, it's looking at a house. So now we've got a house. As a house, you build it, there's your house. It's got a street scene, it's got a garden. There's a house. People move into it, they create a history, they change things, they balance it, they work with a dynamic. The house becomes a home. But now you're turning that home that may have had a bad experience, perhaps the people lost their jobs or whatever reason they couldn't pay their mortgage, it now becomes an investment vehicle. So it's wearing an even different hat. So houses are quite fascinating things. So your customer base increases daily, not because of the amount of people coming in, but what use people are putting those houses to. And those different markets that may start here or may start somewhere else, the ripple effect of that moves between countries, continents. And you can see it's a bit like fashion, isn't it? It goes round. Or something that starts in Australia or Peru, it can get fashionable. Someone wears it, it becomes fashionable. So the fashion moves. And I think that's what happens with property as well. Property is an interesting dynamic over time as well, about the uses we put it to.
When you have, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. When you have someone who approaches you and asks you about a property, how do you find out what they want? What kind of questions do you ask them? Do you find out about their lifestyle, or you get to know them first?
It almost depends on the person, because like we're saying, it depends what they want from that house. So say, if you go back 25 years, what you could almost do then, you could almost do what I call the field of dreams. So you build it and the buyer will come. You can't do that anymore. You'll go bankrupt. So you have to find out. That doesn't mean you build to commission, but what it means is you have to find out, because you can't have a business model that doesn't change with time. So say, for example, now, say a house that I will build, transform now, has different areas within it. So what may have been a 5th bedroom may now be an office. What was a 2nd or 3rd reception room now becomes an elderly person's bedroom. What was a big laundry room now may be reconfigured and provide a shower room, a wet room. So the house has to sort of cater for many different people and at the same time. So it's giving the sort of the flexibility. What I do now is, if you're actually trying, say from your point of view, so I had a situation recently, I went away on holiday, not far, I mean, we can't travel very far, unfortunately, like us all. And I got chatting to an old lady in a place called Southend, which is a seaside village on the east coast of England in Suffolk. And a lot of people who go there have second homes there. They live in London, they work in London. She didn't look like that. I'm not sure what a Londoner looks like, but she didn't look like she ran a hedge fund or a multinational company. She looked tired, and she looked a little bit despondent, a little bit hot. We have some supply chain issues over here at the moment, and she couldn't get any water. Well, I bought some water. So to cut a long story short, we got talking. I gave her my water, and we just got chatting, as you do. And she said, "Oh, what are you doing up here?" And I said, "Oh, well, you know, I've been coming up here many years. We're getting to know each other." So, and she said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm involved in property." "Oh," she said, "Oh, I like property. Everyone likes property. It's the worst kept secret, isn't it? Yeah." Even if you make a living from it, you can still like property. Yeah, you can still see a nice house and go, "Wow." Yeah, it gives you a little lift. Someone gets it right. So she said to me, she said she was quite elderly. She was in her late 70s. And she said that she lived in a flat in south of the river, so South London. And but her dream was to move to a house near where she was brought up, which was north of the river in East London in a place called Tower Hamlets, sort of where the Regent's Canal goes through. So quite close to Hackney. And I said, oh, I said, that's interesting. I said, well, I said, I've just been looking as a favour for a friend of my daughter's. And they were just couldn't find anything. And she goes, I can't find anything. She goes, I've been looking for 3 years and I can't find a thing. She didn't know exactly how to use the apps with the filters and stuff. So of course she's been looking manually through all the different agents. I mean, it must have taken her hours every day. And I said, well, if you tell me your budget, I said, I'm sure I can find you something just by using my phone. If you give me an area, and I said, what exactly are you looking for? And she goes, oh, I'm not really sure, but I'll know it when I see it. And I said, oh, the agents must make an excuse every time you say that. They must have to go off to a meeting, or their child's sick, or someone's gone down with COVID very quickly. I said, that is the worst thing you can tell someone. I'll know it when I see it. Because all you're saying is time waster. I said, if you close your eyes and describe your house to me, I can adjust the filters on my phone, and you haven't been able to find yourself a house in an area of the East End of London, which I know. I reckon I'll find you 80 houses if you can tell me exactly what you want for your budget, just using the filters. So she closed her eyes on a sunny day, sitting under a shaded tree, and she described the property to me. The brick facework, the period, Victorian, the sash windows, the quaint garden, south backing, partly walled, near a bus stop because she can't walk far. She doesn't own a car. So she went through all the criteria, and I typed it into my filters on, we have Rightmove over here, whatever your equivalent is. And I was wrong because only 79 properties came up. And she went, oh my God. And I said, but the house you described, I said, I'm cheating a little bit because as an English gentleman, you have to be honest. I said, but the house you described, I actually looked at and offered to a different client yesterday, and they turned it down because it had 2 bedrooms rather than 3. They weren't looking at the potential, the fact it could have 3 bedrooms. They were looking at what it was rather than what it could become. I said, but the house you described was actually the house that I showed them because it ticked a lot of boxes. It's somewhere safe that I feel safe if my daughters or mother were looking to relocate there. And that's a big factor as well, especially in this day and age. And I said, you actually described that house. So I can actually show you a picture of your dream house. And a tear came to her eyes. She said, I can't believe it. She goes, I love it. And I said, so what are you going to do now? And she said, well, I'm going to go away and think about it. I said, so you'll never buy that house. If you have to think about it, you'll lose it or you'll never do it. She said, it's not that easy. She said, I've got a flat to sell. I said, what do you think estate agents do? Or you call real estate agents? I said, go to the guy, let him earn some more money. Let him sell you your dream house and let him sell your flat in South London to allow you to finance it. So he gets what we call double bubble, both sides of the deal, albeit on different properties. You don't have to worry about your flat, and you've got your dream house. So, you know, it's funny. So you saying about, you know, what factors. I almost don't do sort of textbook stuff. I do story stuff, which is close your eyes and tell me your dream house. Because I know where I can find that house and I know how to find it. It's like you guys. So you're dealing at an end of the market with a certain client base that are probably quite used to saying, I get what I want. That's all well and good saying that, but to facilitate that and for you to support that, they actually have to tell you exactly what they want. And I see some of the makeovers you do, Kat, and the way you dress your houses or stage them, I think you call it, because you can see beyond the colour on the wall, the dog sitting on the carpet, the big mess and that, you can give that a polish. So that guy who's told you exactly what he wants, that house can be what he wants, but he can't see that, you can. So you're earning your money as well. So you're actually producing his dream that he can't see in front of his own eyes because he can't see past the dog or the brown wall. So that's what I do. Close your eyes and make a wish.
How do you walk a couple through a house? How do you walk them through a house?
In my limited experience with couples, it's best to let them walk through the house.
Okay.
Because telling isn't selling when it comes to a couple, because you've got people pulling in different directions.
What do they want?
Well, what the woman wants and what the man wants are probably two different things, and they're looking at the house in very different ways. The woman, and I'm not generalizing here to a point where I'm offending anyone, I hope, but the woman is looking at that house. She may be looking at that house like where she wants to have a family, where she might want her parents to move to, where she wants to see her family grow up, where it's close to a school, a good school, a good catchment. The guy, look, I mean, I'll let you into a secret here, right? We just want a quiet life. As long as your wife's happy, you know, we can get on with our lives, yeah? We can go drinking with our buddies, we can go down to the golf course, we can pretend to be grown up when we're not really. We just want a good life. But do you know also what we want? Is a hierarchy when it comes to alpha males, yeah? We want to be the lion. And the easiest way to be a lion is to get a good deal and add value to it. So when that guy goes down to, he's in the locker room or at the bar or whatever, he's bought this house in a good area, his wife's happy, he's allowed to go and play golf, nothing's a problem anymore. Not only that, guys, I can put a room in the loft, I can build a pool, I can add value to it. So not only have I kept my wife happy, I've also got a good investment. And for a week or two, he's king of the jungle. And that's how simple we guys are. So with couples, to answer your question, I normally let a couple look round, because anything I say is probably going to be deemed to be interference at best. And those guys need to walk around. And sometimes, you know, you women know what you're doing. Us guys, we take a bit of time to catch up, yeah? You just know. Women just know, yeah? This is either going to work or it's not. Guys, they're worried about the repayments. What's the bonus going to be like this year? Don't want to put myself under pressure. You know, we're warriors. Women know. This is where I want my family. This is where I'll be happy. He's worrying about the numbers. The easiest way to get around a guy is giving him investment. Show him a house around the corner that's done an extension. You know, you've just sold it for $1 million more. And the guy only spent $250 on the extension. He'll fall in love with that house as well. So again, they're looking at different things. Let them look around the house and then answer questions. You've always got to give them a little bit of space to sort of come to get up to speed.
So what I hear you say is it's not about us, it's about listening to them, right? Paying attention to the details.
It's being, what do they say? It's about being prepared.
Being prepared.
So you've got to do your homework. they ask you a question, you have to have an answer. And it has to be the right, it has to be the right answer, it has to be the right, it has to be the right answer, like the truthful answer. So very typically, like you said earlier, so you work on volumes and stuff. So someone says to you, well, okay, what's the price of a square foot around here, or however you measure it? You know, what am I going to get out of building this extension you're talking about? How's that going to work? What contractors have you got? You guys, you give an overall service. So you've got attorneys, you've got contractors, you've got all sorts of people you can put their way. So you can lead them down that path. You can hold their hand to a certain extent. And when people are making, let's be honest, probably the biggest purchase of their life, they have to feel they're in safe hands. And the person they're dealing with, 1 is professional, 2 is honest, and 3 knows what they're talking about. So when they ask questions, you have to have the right answers, and you have to have them at your fingertips. And that's about the work you do before you go to the property, or before they go to the property with you.
And comes with experience too, right? You build your team over the years. Do you have your team that you work with for your properties?
I have certain elements of that team. I tend to work with, I'll refer to as artisans. So these are people normally quite elderly. They may even be retired. But if I'm doing a project, say especially a restoration project, so I'm doing one currently at the moment, an Art Deco restoration with a modern back on the back of it. Now, I had some crittle windows replaced. And in doing that, they had to rip out the window boards, the window sills, whatever you call them over there. And one thing I like working with is say, certain colours against other colours, quite natural colours. So I've got the darker, not black, but I use anthracite on the thin profile crittle windows. It just gives it a little edge. It's like a pencil line that just highlights it. But then if you putting that up against white, it's a little bit stark. So I like to put it up against a wood, not a pine because it's a bit too orange, but something more hardwood like mahogany or oak. But then if you're working in woods like that, you've got to find somebody who can still do a biscuit joint, because you don't want it all be stuck together. You don't want them working in MDF or plastic or whatever. You want more traditional elements being incorporated into your refurbishment, because again, it all helps with that feel. It all helps with that attention to detail, because the discerning purchaser, and let's be honest, if he's got a big budget, unless he's won it on the lottery or inherited it, he's probably earned it. And he hasn't earned it by being an idiot. He's earned it because he's the best in his field. And the people like that, I find they want the best. And only the best will do. So it's having the standard in that house that reflects the person who's going to buy it. So he's buying that house because it's top notch. It's got a good kitchen. It depends how they look at it. I mean, because I'm going in and putting in good kitchens, but he may may just want it done because he doesn't want the hassle. So again, it's how you show what you know about that guy or that couple, what they want. So you know, if this guy he's got OCD and he hates dust, there's no point showing him a project unless you've got a rental you want to shift for 6 months as well on the quiet. It's just not going to happen. If you can take him to his dream house, and you've shown me ones over the time that some of them are quite breathtaking, and people must walk into those houses and go, "Oh my God, it's like something off a film." And that sort of impact that a house can make, and I see here, I see people cry.
Really?
Oh, very much so. It's a very emotional journey, isn't it? And again, people need to be supported on that. But when you walk into a house that works, normally, I've got to be honest, it's the women that cry. Unless it's really expensive, then the men tend to cry. But to see a woman cry out of happiness because she's actually found the place where she can have her family and be happy, that's a very emotional experience for all people in that room, including the husbands. We don't like to see our wives cry, but it's a very emotional experience. And if you get their criteria just right, and they walk in there, it's almost like they've had not an out-of-body experience, but it's almost like they've had this sort of epiphany. And it's just this emotion washes over them. And that's because, where we started, they can feel the soul of that house.
What are some of the elements you add on your houses that make that soul, that make that house really luxurious and special?
There's certain, I mean, what I always do is I always do like, in the old days, they'd be called focal points, but now they're more sort of like wow factors. So they're things that perhaps you don't see. So in the old days, you might see a great big American fridge, or you might see an amazing fireplace or an amazing front door. Everything here has gone a little bit sort of the other way now. It's a little bit more understated. And it's more about what you can't see that sells the house. So like we touched on earlier, so the smart elements of that house, the ecological elements of that house, it has its own responsibility. And that's not just down to the people that build it and design it. The house has that responsibility as well. It's sitting there, it's creating its own footprint. So it's a question of, again, getting the balance right, because what's right for one person isn't for another. So again, it's down to you guys, who are you going to show around that house? Because if that person, I mean, for example, a friend of mine, his brother's just sold his holiday apartment in Cornwall to the leader of the Green Party. Now, when the leader of the Green Party buys your property, they cannot afford to buy a property that is, throwing out a lot of carbon this and carbon that, isn't responsible for the way it was built. It has to tick the right boxes. Otherwise, of course, they're criticised of being hypocrites. Mm-hmm. What I look at, in particular, I look at certain areas. I like the hall element that a lot of people don't look at. The obvious ones are, you want a dramatic kitchen or a master suite, yeah, a great swimming pool. But like I was saying earlier, if you're looking at a house, I mean, I reckon that I know, and I don't know how you feel on this, so I'll throw the question back at you. I reckon I know within 10 seconds whether that person's going to buy the house or not.
Yeah.
It's whether that house.
They get very quiet. They get very, very quiet.
Oh, I always say, if people are giving it, we call it giving it the big one, shouting and screaming about it, they'll never buy it. The ones that look around that are like, oh my God, don't give the game away. But normally, so I focus quite a lot in the hallway. So as you walk through the front door, if you can get the balance right of that house to hug you as it walks in, and that may be elements of light, it may be elements of colour, it may be elements of materials like oak staircases, porcelain floors. It can even be as simple as radiators, column radiators that remind you of school days or your grandparents' place. It's just little elements that just trigger emotions in people. So as you get into that hallway, if that house can hug you and remind you of things like smells you get sometimes, you're walking down the street and you smell something and you think you can't quite place it, or you hear a tune on the radio and you haven't heard it for years, and it brings back a memory. And houses can do that if you use the right elements within that house. So it's triggering memories that people can't even remember themselves. So what I'm looking at is that house having a responsibility ecologically, being quite understated at the moment. But then when you go into what I'll call high-tech areas or high-tech elements of the house, so you'll have your Cat 5 cabling, you'll have all the hard wiring into offices and stuff, you know, so you're not dropping off routers and things. You've got amazing interactive smart heating systems, lighting systems, LED lighting. I mean, I do a lot of zoned lighting in kitchens because of the different areas, like we said earlier. Now, the kitchen is quite important still, because kitchens are quite dramatic. Not so much in function, but in functionality, insofar that as you walk into it, like I say, the different elements, the different zones, a bit like a garden, so everyone can enjoy the space at the same time. But then how does that kitchen work? You know, what's that kitchen doing? Because it's got to have a practical element. How many cookers have you got? How many hot water faucets or whatever you call them over there? You know, how's your garbage sorted out? Yeah. What makes your machines? Because what you come into, when I go into a kitchen, it's a little bit like one-upmanship. Because what you don't want is, you don't want to walk into your friend's house and they've got the same kitchen, but they bought it on a sort of a bargain day and got 20% off. Just takes the shine off the kitchen, right? So what I do with the kitchens, I have them handmade. So they're not Christians, they're not Small Bone, they're not Neptune, they're not Mark Wilkinson, they're my kitchens. And the advantage there is that you will never, ever see that kitchen in another house. And neither will your best friend that comes round and wants to rip it apart and bitch about it because her poor mate round the corner's got one, but she got rid of it. She can't do it. So your kitchen's safe. And therefore you are as well.
Do they call you back when the house comes back on the market and they take it back to sell it? Do they call you to show it to you?
What they've done to the house?
Yeah.
In the time they've been there?
Yeah.
Well, the honest answer to that question is I don't know.
They don't.
And do you know why?
Why?
Any house, and I can say so, my daughter's house in life, any house that I've built has never been sold again.
How many years in the making?
I started in 1985.
Oh my goodness.
But I do get presents 20 years later. I recently had a box of chocolates and a card from a lady who bought a house from me many years ago. And I'd done a single story extension for a kitchen out the back. And the builder had said at the time, he said, if you give me an extra £200, I'll put in some extra concrete. That means you'll never have to underpin the house and you can build another story whenever you want. Yeah. Well, I never did this, but when I sold it, I never built that story, the extra floor. So when I sold it, I said to the couple, I said, if you ever want to extend the property, the footings are in already. And they said, oh, thank you very much. It's a bit like swapping addresses on holiday. You don't expect to hear, do you? 20 years later, box of chocolates and a card saying, thank you very much. You just saved us £30,000. Because they allowed us, after a test dig, we could go straight up off the old footings.
They didn't believe you.
Well, it wasn't so much a question didn't believe me, although I did sport a centre parting and a moustache in those days, so it was understandable. But what it wasn't relevant, and that's obviously a big difference. So it wasn't a question of like whether I was being honest or dishonest. It just wasn't relevant to them. They didn't even have a family. So the people I've sold houses to, I always build houses for people to grow into. And then when the children leave, like we said earlier, the flexibility of how it works from that point. So there's actually no reason for that person to leave that house. Because that house, that house is a house for all seasons. So not so much as in weather-wise, but as in the seasons that a house has, or the seasons that a life has. So the house is flexible enough to accommodate whether, say, children want to come back, whether elderly parents who need a bit of support or looking after can have ground floor accommodation and their own privacy, which is very important. Because another thing I'm looking at the moment is that that couples, elderly couples, they don't not only don't share beds anymore, they don't share rooms. So I got asked recently to try and find or build someone's dream bungalow because they couldn't find it. And I must admit, I couldn't find it either, because it actually had to be 2 bungalows in one. Because although they loved each other, they hated being together. So it was almost not a question of building a brick wall down the middle of the house, but they had to have their own space. I mean, who wants to be divorced at 85, yeah? So yeah, so I've never been called back to look at a house or whatever. I get called up a lot to say, I mean, what happens is, right, we're talking about colours and stuff, right? I mix colours. And the reason I do, I'm sure the colour's out there, but it's really, it's too time consuming. So I mix the colours, but I keep the formula. Not because I sell it to somebody afterwards and say, you know, it's not like that. It's just that I have that on file. So if I get a call 10, 15 years later and someone says, oh, the stains we use on wood and stuff, you know, like wooden doors and floors. So I keep the serial numbers, the stain colours, all the criteria you need. So they ring me up, I just look it up and say, right, this is what we used and that, and they can then use it again when they redecorate. And that's how it tends to work. So you don't have to worry about getting the shades right and all that. You're not, you know, I mean, I always give, when I paint a house, right, in those colours with my own formulae, I give not tester pots, but I give pots of that paint to them as well. Because, you know, people do have accidents or you know, where people hammer things into walls or kids put pen marks on the, you know, and it's so they can actually redecorate the room without having to do the whole room. They can do a wall. So I almost give them like a moving in pack, which is all the paints and the stains together. And that gets them up and running if there are any little, because, you know, when people move in, you know, the removal guys, you know, they twist the piano around and it catches one of the door edges or whatever. These things happen. But again, it's just keeping everyone calm. You say, it's okay. We've got the matching thing here. We just touch it in after they've gone. So it's as simple as that. So it's that little bit extra as well, isn't it? Like the moving in present is normally what, a bottle of champagne and some flowers. I give them pots of stain and paint.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Heartfelt.
So any questions you have about us, about the US market, anything you want to know about our market? How are things related with property over there? You use attorneys for all your closings?
We use what we call conveyancing solicitors.
Okay.
So these are specialised solicitors. And what you typically get over here, the system's quite different. So over here, say if a property is on the market, is for sale, one agent has that property. There aren't buying agents. There are buying or selling sites like Rightmove, Yahoo, where people can go on themselves, find a house, then they ring the agent, the selling agent, up directly themselves, and they arrange a viewing or they arrange whatever to go and see the house. So the selling agents here, I mean, say in Southend, I mean, not so much in London, but say here, the typical selling agent's price, commission-wise, there's only one side, there isn't another side of the deal, it's only the selling side, is less than 1%. Okay, so what typically happens is that if the property has got a lot of interest in it, they'll do what you guys do, which is an open day. And that's mainly because there's a lot of interest in it, as opposed to trying to generate interest in it, because it's just a quick way of getting people through and then going to best and final offers. So again, the commission's a lot less. The guys that buy, we're doing, or the buyers are doing their own work. The wives are typically looking during the day and pinging, forwarding stuff to their husbands saying, oh, look, can we go and see this one at the weekend? Well, okay, but book it up Saturday morning's got a game in the afternoon. The wives do a lot of the work. They also like to look around people's properties on Rightmove and look at all the pictures and see what people down the road have got in their kitchen and what fridge they have. You know, it's a little bit like that. So yes, so we have a conveyancing solicitor, and the solicitors, because you then have a chain. So the person buying from you, and then you're buying from the next person up the chain. So all the solicitors, the conveyancing solicitors, talk to each other, and then the transaction goes through instantaneously upon completion. So a deposit will move through upon exchange of contracts. On completion, which is the actual day you move, they all move on the same day. The money moves all at the same time, and everyone in the chain moves at exactly the same time. So it's quite an antiquated system, because until the point of exchange, depending on the market, say for example in London at the moment, on average here, from offer being made to completion, i.e. money's transferred, you moving into your new house, typically with land registry at the moment, their figures, the ONS figures are, the period is 20 weeks. So it's 5 months. Now, whatever a market's doing, it's moving in one direction or another. It's either going up or it's going down over a period of 5 months. And the problem we have with our system is you get a thing called gazumping, and you get a thing called gazundering. And gazumping is where the market's going up. You've agreed a price, but then 3 or 4 months later, somebody comes in and goes, well, I'll give you more. You still haven't exchanged contracts. There's no legally binding contract. And the seller thinks, well, this house is only going to give me one payday. So they actually stop dealing with you and they go with the higher offer. But if the market's going down, what the buyer can do, I suppose not to make it fair, but the converse is true as well. What happens is that the buyer's going like, well, hang on a minute. Since we made the offer on that house, the market's gone down 5%. So we should move our offer accordingly before contracts are exchanged. So that's gazundering. So they'll actually lower their price down. So until you can get that exchange through, it's very hit and miss. And it's not a great system. They keep trying to change it, but they actually don't know what to change it for. Because every system comes with its problems, I suppose. But no, the American thing, the only thing I'd ask you is, I know you've worked in different areas of America, since you're talking about America. So where would be your next tip to buy if you were looking to invest in a property? What would be your tip? So I come to you.
Yeah, I think I like to find opportunities in every area. I think like I found an opportunity to make $400,000 here in our area, like every week. But I like to go to newer areas where houses perhaps are 3 to 4 year old communities and that are growing. And right now there's a lot of movement towards Idaho and Texas, Tennessee, Arizona. Everybody from California is kind of doing a mass exodus towards them. I don't know, I like Florida a lot, but California is fabulous. It's just so far away from everything. Going back to what you said about the way that the agents only represent the seller, that's very, very strange for us, because here in California, the listing agent will only represent the seller. And in the state of California, you have a fiduciary towards the seller. So the buyer usually will get a selling agent to represent them and to help them negotiate and to protect their interests. So, because if you have one agent representing both parties, he will not be taking care of you.
That is an obvious problem. What tends to happen is that the you call the listing agent does work primarily for the seller. That's his clients. That's who pays his money. And what's left is that the buyer, we don't have a buyer's agent. So you, with your conveyancing solicitor, represent that side of the deal. So that's how it tends to work over here. But the onus is very much on the buyer, the caveat emptor element of it, which is buyer beware, because you are dealing with somebody who has has the vested interest in the seller, who is providing his commission on the deal.
Like when I lived in Florida, homes that were built, we would sell homes that were built in the 20s and 30s. And those homes, you have to be very, very careful. Like, you know, you could move into them and you could get asthma. You could, you know, have to be very careful to get them all.
We have surveys done before we move in. As part of almost the mortgage process. They will have their own independent surveyors. But also people can do their own surveys, have specialist companies come in. For example, it's very interesting what you say there, because I tend to deal in the older properties that use materials that are a little bit unsafe.
Lead.
They may have lead in them, asbestos, things that aren't good for you, you know. And as you know, with old houses, you get issues with damp, which come with spores. There's all sorts of things. But you do your own checking. You get your surveyor in there, but a lot of it comes down to common sense. And if you see something or smell something, it normally means there's something worth checking out.
Yeah, great. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you very much for meeting with me today. You provide a lot of value to us, and hopefully next time that you are in our area, we will invite you over to meet everybody at our committee meeting in person. I won't be at the doing a live meeting this Friday. This is why we're recording this call. So I want to thank you again, and I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay, thank you very much as well.
How can somebody reach you if they have more questions? Do you want to provide your email?
Now, or will you provide that?
Yeah, may I
can do it.
Yes, go ahead.
I can do it now, yeah. So it's lowercase, it's Matt Jones, MATTJONES, 3000 @hotmail.co.uk.
Perfect. So if they have more questions, or if they want your advice, or if they want you to build a house for them, they know how to find you.
They do indeed. Thanks a lot, Kat.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.